For those who don't know me, my name is John Fultz. I'm the director of the user interface group at Wolfram Research. Under my purview is most notably the Mathematica front end, all things related to the Mathematica front end, but also I do mobile apps and both, including the Wolfram Alpha stuff that we shipped, and so I'm not going to talk about those today, but that's, if you have any questions, that's the kind of stuff that you can bring to me. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about where we've been with the front end over the last year, and a little bit about teasing a few things about where we're going. And one of the nice things about some of the teasers is we've kind of kicked up our ability to ship new versions of the product. And so unlike for the long timers around here where we used to tease things and then maybe like 2 years later you might see them, so the stuff that I'm teasing here is by and large stuff that I would expect to see, if not by the end of the year, then very early next year. So let me talk a little bit about, just by way of explanation, for those who've been here before, you know that I often give an hour-long keynote. I'm not doing that this year, and part of the reason I'm not doing that this year is because this year has been kind of a year of infrastructure for us, and that infrastructure hasn't quite fully matured yet, but we put a lot of work into it. So I decided to kick the football forward one more year. But let me talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing, just because some of these things are things that a lot of people have questions about. And so I want to give you some confidence that these are things that we definitely care a lot about here. So the big projects we've been working on, modernizing the Unicode support and modernizing the drawing support under Windows. Actually, the Unicode support, we are just about ready to ship, but the drawing support is a little ways away yet. The 64-bit Cocoa port for Macintosh, this is something people have been asking about for a long time, and yes, we're well aware that the situation could be better on that front, and it's in progress, but it's a bigger project than, well, even than we anticipated. That's a consequence of having a source code base that's been around for 20 years. So we're also working on updating our OpenGL and Direct3D implementations. A lot of our rendering right now pre-exists the sea change that hit OpenGL and Direct3D when they moved away from kind of regular procedural sorts of drawing to running programs on the card. And we we do some shader stuff and that sort of thing, but we've been limited in what we've been capable of doing because of the underlying infrastructure. And so that's another thing that we're working on, and as well as that pesky mobile operating system that people keep asking about. And yes, I know there are 2 mobile operating systems. We're looking at both of them, but I'm only willing to put 1 bullet point on here. So if you have questions about the other one, feel free to ask. I may or may not answer. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we are doing, though. And this is the danger of giving a talk after Stephen, is that he steals your material liberally. But let me go into a little more detail about this. So, code captions. The idea here is that almost all programming languages, there are a few exceptions, but really almost all programming languages, and certainly all programming languages with any real traction around the globe, require, if not English, at least the ability to memorize stuff that means nothing to you, but it means a lot to the English-speaking world. And the Wolfram language is really no exception here. And in fact, in the case of the Wolfram language, it's actually kind of a bigger deal because we don't have 20 or 30 or 50 keywords. We have 6,000 or more. I don't know. Did it hit 7,000 yet? It's getting up there in any case. And we think a lot about names. Names are not slapdash. Names are, fundamentally, the name and the design of the function go together. So it's something we think a lot about, and we realize there's an opportunity for branching out, especially in the educational market. There have been initiatives around the globe to teach kids computer science, teach kids how to code, and that's great for English-speaking kids, or kids even who might speak English as a second or third language, but it's difficult for kids who haven't had that sort of exposure. So that's the idea here, is to try to make something that it's not a translation of the language. You're not typing in stuff in your own language, but at the very least, these things which maybe were foreign to you, you get an idea in the same way that an English speaker gets an idea. So that's why you'll never see code captions in English, because the language itself is the English version. We have several languages, and so here is Japanese, and then this is a better example of something that I want to show in terms of, some languages are very verbose. I picked German because it may very well be the most verbose language around. And that produces something of a challenge when you're trying to do this sort of thing. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about music, choral music. In choral music, you end up, you as a musician following notes end up having these really widely spaced bars so that all the words can fit in underneath and line up. And we want to line up in the same way that choral music does, but we don't want to affect the way that the language is actually typed and displayed, other than to have these captions in place. And so the solution that we came up with was something where we show just as much of the caption as we can. Here you can see in the geometric transformation case, it's cutting off the caption for graphics to the left. But then, if what you're doing is you're reading code, and a lot of times when you'll be looking at this, that's where you'll start. You start by reading code, looking at examples other people have done and modifying them. And all you have to do is mouse over, and these things will pop out over the others. And actually, the geometric transformation one, I guess, was the better example, because it pops over the next two subsequent ones. So that's it's an idea that we had in terms of jumping into the fray in terms of teaching kids to code, an initiative that we're definitely supportive of. If that's something you're interested in, you kind of have an interest in this or more ideas on this front, love to hear them. So code captions are easy to turn off or change language. They're also in the help system. Our help system is riddled with examples. All the examples have code captions, and the code captions are in the cloud front end as well. They're also in the web docs, I think we're still working on the JavaScript for the web docs to kind of improve that experience. But I believe it's already there, at least for some languages, in the web docs. And as Stephen said earlier, it's it's a nice sort of thing to do, because it actually turns out not to be that expensive. I think on my previous slide, I listed here the languages which we have so far. These languages, it wasn't that difficult for us to do these languages. It took a couple weeks per language, basically. With one really knowledgeable person. So other things that we did, we're continuing to work on what we internally call our Code Assist initiative. The idea of Code Assist being kind of twofold. One is to make it easier to quickly and accurately type your code into the front end, and the second to be in some cases to prompt where maybe the code, maybe you're not really sure what can be done, or you have some idea of what can be done. In that case, to try to get you, to teach you about the language, teach you alternate input forms or alternate functions that you might be using or such. So it's a lot of boring work. That's not too sexy, but it certainly does make a big difference. When you're doing something like, say, interpreter of. And sorry, that came out a little small there. I forgot to set the magnification on that. But being able to see, just for those who can't read, it starts with number, which is the most obvious one at the top. And then from there, we can see interpreter of nuclear explosion. That's a new one for me. Didn't know that. And nuclear reactor and nuclear test site. So a lot of this is about systematically going through the language and finding places where we can figure out sensible completions and do them. And especially this, where there are these string selectors for something like city data, we can put in say my current hometown of St. Louis. And city data is, being a Packlet function, it gets a little finicky about how you type in things. So, we're sloppy about it. We say, well, if you typed in a string, it's not valid with just a string, but we figure it out, and we'll complete whatever's there. So, and then we have one of the things which is beginning to happen in the language, and I'm sure is going to happen more and more, is you're going to see functions which take associations where the string keys where the keys in the association are strings that are basically value selectors that are meaningful to the specific function which you're typing into. And so sendMail is such a function where if you want to sendMail is about sending mail, and there's a lot of metadata related to mail. And if we just put all that in as, we do have the simple cases as like the 1 or 2 argument form or something like that. But if we added all that, it'd be options and options and options. And so we set up an association input form instead, where you can then, and then it figures out that that I might be referring to subject or to server authentication, all valid fields for the association going into the sendMail. Yeah, going into the sendMail association there. So, simple, but trying to make the experience easier, especially with a language that has 6 or 7 or 8. Is it 8,000 yet? Symbols. So, and one of the things which is an obvious thing to want to do is you want to be able to add your own completions as well. If you're designing your own code, of course you want to add your own completions, and we've been doing a little bit of this in-house. Something that didn't get the design for this together for the 10.3 release that came out, but I think you can expect to see this in the next release, though. So it might look a little different from this, but the ability to basically, for any function that you want, and what I'm doing here is I'm defining a function that takes a first argument, which is a file, and so then it invokes file name completion. And a second argument which takes a specific list of strings. In this case, the list of strings which $export formats evaluates to. But it could be any list of strings that you want. We can support directories, we can support colors as well. And so then, if I type in this right now and I do this, I get no completion. But now if I register things here, and now I start typing, and now it's going to figure out, this first argument is indeed a file name, and so it can complete right off my file system. And then the second argument is going to, there we go, our BMP format. And so, this is the sort of thing which one of the pet projects I've been doing for the last year. I've been building actually something non-front end related, but I've been really kind of hitting the front end, hitting the system as a development environment for real production level stuff we want to ship. And this was one of the first things we realized is we have to get the completions in there. So. Okay, and then Stephen talked a little bit about this. The text grid. It turned out not to be that difficult to implement, and it was just an idea at some point where somebody sent some Excel spreadsheet around, and Stephen said, "Well, why aren't we eating our own dog food?" Okay. He actually said something a little different, maybe a little louder. But in any case, so we ended up coming up with this idea for text grid, which builds on a lot of our current technology. I mean, we could have, this is a thing that you could have built before, but it wasn't kind of quite so easy to use. So something which, instead of producing expressions, ends up, just taking strings and having them appear as text, and being able to when I edit it, to do the right thing with tabbing around, but everything still remains as text, and so I'm glad you appreciate it. In any case, so a text grid is kind of a weird little thing because you might use it for output, but you might use it for output that you really want to be editing as well. Yeah, so. Since I didn't have a super long list of functionality, I did want to talk a little bit about some of the things which are in the pipeline, things which I could actually demo. And like I said, I mean, given that I can demo them, these are not too far from heading out the door. So this is something that's actually in our nightly builds right now, which is real-time spell checking. Yes, I know other people have had it for years and years, but now we have it too. So yes, in fact, we were close to being able to do this for 10.3, but just needed to polish off a few things. But yes, including mouse overs, being able to automatically just fix things in place. Very simple. Very simple if you actually click on, okay, I did say there was a reason we weren't shipping, there we go. Okay, and not just English, we are also supporting some other languages too. I'm showing Spanish here. We also have Portuguese and Korean, because those were the easy dictionaries to find. If you care about a language, help us define a dictionary that we can redistribute, and we'll talk to you. So, but we are working to source more dictionaries, and maybe by the time the next release comes out, we'll actually have more. Okay. Another thing, we're doing some controls work, and one of the kind of embarrassing sorts of things which we've been missing for a long time is combo boxes. In fact, I think we've written at least 3 versions in-house of things which kind of act like a combo box but aren't really a combo box. And so now we're doing the real thing. It will be very straightforward. It's just really a combo box is just an input field with a menu list. So I have this here which generates this, which I can type into, but then I can also choose options. And so that's, for those who don't know what combo box means, that means it's kind of the combo of an input field and a pop-up. But the more interesting thing, and I really had wanted to demo this, and we just could not quite scrape it together for the demo, but nonetheless, I think we will be shipping this in the not too distant future, is also supporting a fully user specifiable user specifiable completion interface for input fields. So being able to define your own completions, which might be dynamic as users type, for example. And you see this sort of thing in, I think the most common case is probably web browser URL bars. And so that's a tool that we want to be able to use for building our own interfaces, and we want to be able to provide it to you as well. So something else, once again, this is a small thing, but it's one of life's annoyances, which I was no longer willing to put up with. And for this, I'm going to have to unmaximize here just a bit. So let me get some of this other stuff out of the way. I work with products under version control, as I'm sure most of you do too, and it would be really convenient to actually be able to, in fact, we just switched to Git about a year ago, and it would be really convenient to have updates from version control or from whatever automatically reflecting in open notebooks and not having the notebooks fighting for access to those files. And so this is something which so here is an example here of a notebook which is on a given branch, and what I'm only doing Wolfram language code here just so that I didn't have to bail out to a shell, but all this is doing is replacing the file behind the scenes with a version of the file from another branch, and when I do that, you're going to see that it reopens with the changes that I have on the other branch. So, like I said, one of life's annoyances finally resolved. And this is another one. So Stephen talked about echo this morning, and of course, how do people debug problems in Wolfram language code? Frustratingly, a lot of times it's with print statements. We do have debuggers, but they're not necessarily so easy to use sometimes, and especially for people who don't have experience, working with debuggers, it can be very daunting. And also, frankly, debuggers tend to work better when you're dealing with lines of code as opposed to stack frames, where you might have 10 stack frames in a single line of code. I mean, that's a problem that we're still working on, but here's the debugger that we have, actually, the most significant use case, which was really useful, was message breakpoints. So we thought, well, why do we have to do the message breakpoints in order to see what's actually happening when a message is issued? Why not just produce, and this is a prototype, so it's actually producing 2 messages. That's not the final design, but you see, so this is the copy of the message as it was, but now we have this new thing, which when we click, will give us I'm sorry, once again, should have adjusted the magnification on this, but it gives us, for those who can't see, there's a stack trace there at the bottom. This fails. This function fails because it's looking for f of 0 equals 1, but I called it with f of 5 period, so it's going to end up with f of 0 period, and it's not going to detect that, and then it's going to go into this underflow case. And so, now's my chance to figure out, where did this message come from? What function did it even come from? If you have 10 different calls to a given function, it may be difficult to figure out the stack trace there. And so this is a stack trace exactly when you want it, when the message is being issued. And this is something that we think is going to make everyone's lives a lot easier. So, and so that is about the end of my talk. I just wanted to highlight a few other people in my group who are giving talks. And one of the big ones at 3:30 today, Robert Regay-Schofield is going to be talking about, well, the talk is called Mobile CDF Deployment, but it's really CDF Player on iOS, which is a thing. I'm Rob's running on his iPad. I'm running on my iPad. If you want to see it, come up to talk to one of us. I think his build is slightly newer than mine, but we have something that works, and we are working like crazy to be able to actually get it out the door. Also giving talks about the Wolfram Cloud app, Nick Zitzman, Yutsu's giving a talk tomorrow on 3D graphics, and then we have the talks on Thursday. Jason Harris is giving a typesetting workshop, and Lou DeAndrea is, if you've had issues with dynamic programming and like to understand more about how to work with dynamic module, et cetera, you definitely want to go to Lou's talk. I'm also giving a talk on Thursday morning about the Git stuff. If you're interested in that, not really front-endish, but if you're interested in Git, you'll definitely want to come to that. So thank you very much.